So, Captain Marvel. If you've been under a rock, you probably haven't heard about all the stuff surrounding this movie. Not production problems, which would be understanding of anything, but just sort of once again how weird the comic book community is on anything. Let's be clear, the comic book community is actually pretty small compared to just about every other community, I think. It feels a bit more divided in terms of how things are going here, because when Brie Larson came out and talked about how she didn't want her press tour or her press release, I forget the exact words, what you call it, she didn't want it to be so overly white male. It came across as an issue that she had a problem with white men, or rather, a rather really weak and sort of bland issue. And with the hypersensitivity of the internet right now, of fandoms, of social media as a whole, it was a really stupid thing to say. And even more so when you double back down and say, well, look, I don't hate white dudes. And the problem with that was it came across that, like Leslie Jones, Brie Larson doesn't quite know how to be a public figure, doesn't quite know how to handle the social media. Remember, we're at the point now where everything you say and do is heavily scrutinized and heavily read. And this isn't to give her a pass on something that she might have said that was offensive to anyone, or to sort of overplay anything she said that wasn't offensive to anyone. It's just a natural fact. Celebrities should be very careful with what they say. I'm very careful with what I say on the internet, on social media, even amongst my friends. So then, of course, we had issues with the diversity defense. Those of you who were critical of Black Panther may have come across this with some people who said, "Look, your problem is you have a problem with black superheroes," which is stupid. Granted, there are people that have problems with black superheroes, but that's a totally separate issue. To write off everyone that has a criticism of Black Panther as someone who has a problem with black superheroes is intellectually dishonest. And this is what's called the diversity defense, if I didn't say it already. The same thing is happening with Captain Marvel. Any criticism of this movie is being written off as, well, you have a problem with female superheroes. This is, for the most part, not true. Most comic book fans love female superheroes, or at the very least, don't have a problem with them until they see the movie. There was some vitriol with Wonder Woman, that's to be sure, but for the most part, people saw the movie and didn't have a problem with it. But we're ultimately getting off topic here. What was this movie? This movie was alright. I think that's the best way to sum it up. Was it the best Marvel movie? No. It felt like what we were really trying to do was introduce a character that was going to serve a different role than characters that came before her. Which is weird because, chronologically, this is supposed to come after what? I think Captain America? The first Captain America? Yeah, it's supposed to take place after that one. Because Captain Marvel is supposed to be an important character going on not just into Avengers Endgame, but into the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Kevin Feige even pointed out saying, well, she's the most powerful hero on Earth right now, which would include characters like Thor. And that doesn't quite make sense to me, but whatever. What this movie is sort of good at is showing exactly how the Avengers Initiative came to be, that's for sure. It's very sort of a better version of Men in Black 3. Without time travel, we're just saying, hey, this is how this character got to be on the board. I would say the weakest thing about this film is Brie Larson's acting. This isn't to say that Brie Larson is a terrible actress. I think the scenes where she's actually really good in, I think are pretty decent. The problem is she has the same problem, in my opinion, as Jennifer Morrison, who you may have seen in House and in Once Upon a Time. Jennifer Morrison and Brie Larson seem to have the same problem where they don't quite know how to be happy or angry. Their voice doesn't quite match the outrage or whatever emotion they're trying to convey. They have a bit of a dry wit to them, which can work in some cases. But to me, Captain Marvel, at least in versions I've seen her in, should always sort of be a bit of a hothead. She's, in a lot of ways, she, like Thor, is a bit of a hammer. But she's not as refined a hammer as Thor, because Thor has, all of his years of experience behind him, his maturity. Whether or not that always comes through in comics is up for debate, and readers will each have their own. But Captain Marvel has always, her first response is usually before she joins Alpha Flight, before she is, totally cemented in the superhero community, has always sort of been, let's punch it. Or blast it, depending on the powers. And to me, that should come with a sort of short fuse. And maybe the short fuse is reached, but not the emotional outburst that I think would be necessary for this character. Everyone else turns out, I think, a much stronger performance. Whether it be Samuel L. Jackson or Jude Law, and I think Jude Law's character might have actually been the weakest, in my opinion, just because it was sort of obvious which direction it's going to go. And by the way, this is going to be as much of a spoiler-free review as possible. I think I'm going to have one spoiler in here, just because it actually did irk me a bit as exactly how this movie worked. But everyone's performance was great. The character that had the best impact on Brie Larson's performance was Samuel L. Jackson, which also, in my opinion, puts Brie Larson on the same line as Kit Harington from Game of Thrones. Like, his acting has always been best when he's had someone to play off of. He's never been known to really communicate a range of emotions or actions on his own. He's usually had to have a strong actor with him, like Rose Leslie. Like, some of the best scenes of Jon Snow was when he was with Ygritte. And for this movie, Carol Danvers' best acting has been when she's with Nick Fury. Fury, who I think really steals the show right from beneath her, as well as the Skrull Talos. They create a much more, I think, intricate story, and that maybe we could have just had a movie with Nick Fury and Tulso, just to see those two go. But Captain Marvel, she does a decent job, but for the more complex scenes, I think she's a bit wasted on. Or at the very least, this script and the direction does not give Brie Larson, I think, the push she needs. Or maybe Marvel's just saving it for Endgame, because, again, in Endgame, Captain Marvel is going to play a big role, and she's presumably going to lead the Avengers team in the future after that. Visually, this movie, I think, looks good enough. I'm not sure if the movie tried to go for a darker tone by physically making the movie look darker. I don't think it worked. The 1995 setting, I think, worked in a lot of places. I think the musical choices was great. But for that, there's really not much else to it. The supporting cast, I think, is great. Monica and Marissa Rambeau, I think, were great characters. I love that subtle nod to Monica Rambeau, the Captain Marvel that came before Carol Danvers. The Collective on Hala was all right. I think it would be more interesting if we got more into that. The Kree Empire is, I think, intentionally left to be obscure, to be hard to figure out. I think something else is going to come there. The Skrulls was sort of an interesting choice because there's a bit of not really retconning, but sort of a different direction taken in the Skrulls, but I think was a bit political. And I don't think it's political in a bad way. Don't get me wrong. I have no problem with politics in superhero stories. Very few comic book fans do. The question is how it's done. And understanding the Kree and Skrull history, I think, would require more time and effort than I think anyone watching this channel or anyone who does a video on this channel is willing to put in, because I'm a lazy jerk. I really am. But anyway, the direction they went with that, I think, is good. I think when most people think the Kree, they think of Secret Invasion. When they think the Skrull, I think they think of the Secret Invasion. When I think of the Skrulls, I think of the New Avengers Illuminati book. You know, the Skrulls that, kidnapped, well, rather experimented on Mr. Fantastic, Black Bolt, Professor X, Iron Man, that character. And even more so when I think of Kree, I think of the people from Death of the Inhumans. So it's been interesting to sort of go into that and to see the direction they went with the Skrulls. They're a bit more sympathetic here, but they're also just as dangerous. They're also very interesting, especially because of Tulso. And then comes to the question of what the director of this movie said, which is a feminist movie. I'm not quite sure what a feminist movie is. When I think of what could be considered a feminist movie, I would think of a historical piece. Something along the lines of sort of Amelia Earhart, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie. Stories about women doing things. If a story about a woman doing a thing is automatically a feminist movie, then we could probably say The First Wives Club is definitely a feminist movie. Bring It On is a feminist movie. If anything, you could make the argument, say, like the Yaya Sisterhood, Sister of the Traveling Pants, Fried Green Tomatoes, Pretty Woman, maybe? But I think it's very weird to view a superhero movie as a feminist movie, because superhero movies, whether or not you want to say they're predominantly have a male support group, have always been designed to be for everyone. Wonder Woman's a feminist icon, but I wouldn't view her movie as a feminist movie. And Captain Marvel, I don't think is. Presumably, My issue was that they changed the gender of Marvel to a woman. That's my spoiler. And that also sort of changed exactly how Carol got her powers. This way is designed to be quote unquote an accident, but also because of women's. And in the original story, Marvel effectively gives Carol her powers, but even recently, Marvel's retconned that to the idea that, Carol's mother was actually Kree as well. And then she came down to Earth to do Kree things. Then she met Carol's dad, who's a jerk in just about every continuity, but, nothing comes from it from the story wise. In a recent Captain Marvel comic, it was played up the idea that he was drinking to compensate for to deal with his stress, because he was constantly under the fear that someone was going to come and take Carol away. So he constantly tries to keep her down so that she won't go too far. Like, she wants to join the Air Force. Like, no, you're not going to join the Air Force. You're not going to join NASA, because if you do that, there's a chance they might come and take you. He can't tell her that. So there's a lot of stress coming out. He's seeing enemies everywhere, and he drinks to relieve the stress. That story is not told here. And even more so, the Dr. Larson, the Marvel character here, doesn't have much of an impact on the story. She's hinted at being a mentor, but she's not really shown as being a mentor. And I think that's what's missing here. One of the really cool things about superhero stories, or the hero's journey in general, is the mentor character. Nick Fury isn't that character. Tulsa isn't that character. Coulson isn't that character. Jude Law attempts to be that character, but his character has his own direction. If I had any real problem with this movie outside of the Marvel thing, it would definitely be the last, I want to say, third of this movie. Leading up to the climax, it felt like it was a lot of really annoying points coming off here to sort of promote a lazy image of girl power. Because there is some really strong aspects to Carol Danvers' story as how it's presented here, that she and her friend Marissa joined the Air Force, and when women weren't allowed in combat positions, and they fought through, and they made it, and they tried to make it, and one reason or another, some did, some didn't. That's inspiring, and we see the effect that it has on Marissa's daughter, Monica. That's great. I think that's a great feminist moment. But the problem is the rest of the movie doesn't quite do it, unless you want to go with this idea that Jude Law's character keeps telling her, you got to control your emotions because you're a woman and emotional. But there are also women that Jude Law's character works with that aren't that, so that falls apart. I want to say that at worst, absolute worst, this is a lazy idea of what a feminist movie could or should be. I'm not acting like I'm an authority on that. But I do know story. At least I think I know story. I know what I feel does and doesn't work. And in my opinion, when this movie doesn't want to put in the work to be what I think a feminist movie should be. Which should be going more in depth into the characters, into the people that help further our protagonist. And again, if I want to go like a full-on anti-SJW, call me a neckbeard with a trilby hat. I do not wear trilby hats, by the way. I don't wear fedoras either. I do not wear anything like that. I wear a pork pie hat. I would point out that the closest thing to a competent male here is Nick Fury, and Carol spends a lot of time sort of mocking him, but he's also Carol's only real friend throughout this, even when we meet her best friend. But every other male here seems to be either a joke or incompetent. And I highly doubt that's entirely true, but if I wanted to nitpick, I would probably go with that argument. This isn't like the Star Wars for Kids video, where Leia comes in and Luke and Han are totally incompetent. What is Captain Marvel? It's a superhero movie, but she's not really that super. Everything about this movie means well, I think. Everything about this movie wants to get really close to being a really great superhero movie, but I also feel that because of how important Captain Marvel's character is, no one wants to actually push her character in the direction she needs to now. They want to save it for Endgame, which could be great. Everything for Captain Marvel's character will not be decided in Captain Marvel. It will be decided in Endgame. Or maybe I'm wrong and this is an entire waste of your time. Anyway, with that in mind, let's bring this video close here. If you're new to the Bucket Thing, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Check out some other videos on this channel. It really helps. Leave your thoughts on this movie as well. Are you looking forward to Captain Marvel's future in Avengers Endgame? What's your favorite part about the Skrulls? Huh? 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 Well, this is the Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching, and may your fandom serve you well.